A good way to annoy a mental health professional is to say or to tell them that it is impossible to change one's mental state on purpose. I think that's a pretty good way to annoy them. I'd say it would annoy them. I don't know if it's a particularly good idea to annoy people by saying things like this, but my point is that it would be very hard for them to process, for most of us to process, for the vast majority of the human race to process. It's like giving someone a big lump of something that is non-processable, indigestible, a big lump of stuff, and then again, well, what did you give me this for? What am I supposed to do with this? I can't even begin to digest this. So it's something like that. So the very key principle is that none of us can change our mental state on purpose. Absolutely the most impossible thing in the whole wide universe. Immaculately impossible, sublimely impossible, superbly impossible. It's just so totally impossible. It's just something else. Now, I suppose if we were in an enjoyable mental state, of course, that would never be a question, because we wouldn't be trying to change our mental state. And of course, when we do find ourselves in an unpleasant or painful, awkward, uncomfortable mental state, then of course we want to change it. And to a very significant extent, our whole society is about providing us with ways to flip out of those unwanted mental states at will. Or rather, that's the illusion it provides us with. Well, it's an illusion we've already got, but it's an illusion that it facilitates and amplifies. So it kind of says, it kind of sounds like I'm saying two things. That I'm saying that we can't change our mental state, and yet I'm saying that's what we're all about. We're always changing our mental state. So how can those two statements go together? And the answer to that is simply that when we do flip from one mental state to another, or when we repress the arising of some particular mental state because we don't want to know about it, which again, I think all psychotherapists would probably go along with the suggestion that that is what we all do an awful lot of the time, repress unwanted mental states. Repression is the name of the game when you're living the unconscious life, the everyday life. It's all about repression. It's all about repression, and it's also all about tricks or cheats. So the thing is that actually, yes, we can change our mental state, but only if we do so via a trick or a cheat, which means that we're not really changing anything, but we're creating a very workable impression that we are. Workable enough for us to go along with it and treat it as if it's not just a cheap trick. And the thing about cheap tricks is, of course, they're going to be our downfall in the end, because they'll catch up with us. It's a kind of an old-fashioned thing to say, but you can imagine there's two routes in life. One route is just going straight ahead and honestly dealing with things, and it's kind of like the hard work way. And then there's the other way, the clever way, the cheating way, that I'm going to jump on your head and jump over you and get there before you by some sort of trick, which is what we're all into. It's kind of like what capitalism's about. Everyone's trying to get a bigger share of the wealth, the dosh, by tricks. by being trickier than everyone else. That's the illusion put forth by the business world, that there's this thing called value, that value is being created. And so it seems, anyway, I don't know if they still use that word. The value is being created in terms of commodities or products, and so we get rewarded for this creating value in the world by cash, with status. So that's okay because we've created value. This is a pretty lame excuse for capitalism, really, because what we're calling value is usually selling people stuff they don't need, and which is also bad for them. One, you don't need it. Two, it's bad for you. Bad for your mental health, bad for your physical health, bad for your emotional health, spiritual health. You name it, it's bad for you. That is pretty much what we do. Not entirely, but on the whole, when you're looking at the big scale of things, mass production of things, all the things that are mass produced are bad for us, really. Society is bad for us. Bad for our mental health, physical health, emotional health, etc., etc., etc. So the idea that we should be justly rewarded for producing some new bad thing to sell to people or to con people into buying, that this equals value, we should be rewarded for it. That's kind of what is really going on there. But I mean, the idea, basically, to come back to what I was talking about, is that we validate our cheating and see it as being noble and heroic, and that we totally deserve the prize that we had illegitimately obtained. So when it comes to mental states, we value the euphoric or pleasurable mental states. So that is the prize that we're trying to win the whole time. And that's what we're being clever in, we're thinking, what are all the things that I can do to obtain euphoric states of mind? Now, come on level, we could say, well, people, they have the basic motivations of whatever the hell it is. The motivation to power, the motivation to control other people, the motivation to have good stuff, the motivation for everyone else to think you're great, all that kind of stuff. But it all comes down to the motivation to obtain euphoric mental states, because if you have a whole load of money, that produces a euphoric mental state in your head, and that's what you like. You don't like the money. The money's garbage. Do you like the euphoric state? So the point of me saying all of this is just to say, well, in one way, it really, really does seem as if we can change our mental state. And because we can, obviously, we change our mental state from an unpleasant one, an awkward one, or a painful one, to a pleasant one, a gratifying one. Why wouldn't we? If it's possible to change our mental state, that's what we do. And I'm kind of saying that's what we do, mostly do or try to do. But it doesn't really work. So in a way we can say, well, if we concentrate on the short term and say, here's a euphoric state of mind, I do X, Y, and Z, and I'll get it, so I do X, Y, and Z, and then I get the euphoric state of mind. If I look at things in a small way, I can say, yes, here I am, I've changed my mental state. But if you look at the bigger picture, what we see is that what appears to be a profit in the small scale is cancelled out later on, because this controlling in order to obtain a desirable mental state is actually neurosis. We're fighting against things and trying to avoid whatever emotional state is legitimately ours, i.e. it really is ours. We don't have to control to get it because it's actually coming to us right now. It's genuine, it's legitimate. So that we get the prize, and the prize on the very, very short, if we're being very, very short-sighted about it, it's great. We can say, super great, this is wonderful. which we do. We get exultant, we get excited. And we only do that by not looking ahead to see that, well, after the euphoria comes the dysphoria. So when we do that, when we cheat by controlling, we create a kind of little revolving wheel that goes round and around and around, and we have to keep on doing that. And as long as we keep thinking we're going to get somewhere, and then we're going to go a positive without a negative, and we think we can win without ever losing, we'll carry on doing that. But this is not equal to really being able to change our mental state. All we've done is just put ourselves on a wheel that is made up of two things, euphoria and dysphoria, and we're on that wheel. So being on this wheel, which spins forever and never goes anywhere else other than euphoria and dysphoria in equal amounts, is not two different states, it's the same state. So this state of mind is a state of mind which isn't a state of anything, because it's a nullity. It doesn't exist. It's a cheat, and we cheat ourselves out of life itself. So that doesn't count as changing our mental state. What it does count as is entering into the realm of self-deception or self-delusion. In the state of self-deception or self-delusion, I can, of course, delude or deceive myself into believing that I have successfully changed my mental state for the better. And that's what I trade on. But that's self-deception. That's not a genuine thing. So all of the times that we think we are in control of our mental state and we can keep the bad shit away and we can have a happy time and all of that, we're deceiving ourselves. And if we are prepared to deceive ourselves, then we can obtain this particular illusion that this is actually true. Obviously, that's the whole point of self-deception, is that we obtain this illusion that we can believe in. But in no way does this actually mean that we can change our mental state. Because if we were actually to look into it without falling victim to self-deception and actually look at it over a long period of time, we would realize that there is only one way that a painful mental state goes away, and that's when it is good and ready to go away. And it will be good and ready to go away when we have felt it and not avoided it. Which is obvious in some cases. With grief, we know that when we grieve fully and we abandon ourselves to our grief and we taste the grief, what is there, we feel every little bit of it that is there thoroughly. We know at the other end of that there is coming through the grief again. We know that. We don't get stuck in grief forever unless we're avoiding it, in which case we can get stuck in grief forever. So we understand that in relation to grief. We can see people that are not going there and they're not feeling the grief because they haven't allowed themselves to feel it yet. And we can see that goes on forever. It's kind of a stalemate. And we can also see that when people do go into the healthy grief response, that isn't a stalemate because it's a process, not a dead end. So the jump is to see that all dysphoric, all states of mind, dysphoric or euphoric, are like this. And this is an idea that is expressed in Buddhism with the three stages of self-arising, self-displaying, and self-liberating. So that all states of mind, all thoughts, all emotions, they come about all by themselves. And they show themselves to us, make themselves known, manifest themselves, tell us about themselves, or more than just telling, they allow us to know all about it. And then if that second stage, self-displaying, is not interrupted, then we go on to self-liberating, because the painful state of mind then liberates. It's like a feeling that's being felt. Off it goes. There's no need to feel it anymore, it's being felt. So that's pretty clear. It's very, very alien to us in the West, though, because we're all about targeting the self-display. And if we could, we'd target it earlier, but certainly when it gets to the self-displaying phase, we want to put a block at saying, and what we're saying to that painful mental state is, don't display, I don't want to know about you. Back off. And that is where the delusory change comes in, because we can fool ourselves that we've got rid of it and then we'll feel good, and we spend a lot of time doing that. But then we'll feel doubly bad when it comes back to us again. We'll feel bad with interest. So it really does seem that for the most part, the idea of letting the mental state display itself and run its course doesn't ever occur to us. And that's just another way of saying we don't see that mental health, or the psyche, we could say, is a natural process that does its own thing, and in a manner of speaking, that it knows what it's doing. We don't know. I mean, obviously we don't know. We don't know a damn thing. How could we know about that? We don't have to know. It's not for us to get all nosy and interfering and try and take over natural processes. What a recipe for a bad time that would be, if we had to take over all the natural processes and ensure that they happen in the correct way ourselves, and stand over them and monitor them and micromanage them and control them. What a terrible nightmare. And that's exactly the nightmare that we create for ourselves when we believe that we can purposefully change a mental state. We create that nightmare for ourselves. And our idea of being optimally mentally healthy is to go around practicing these things with stress management, blah, 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 emotional management, anxiety management, anger management, all these things. Walking down the street. So here I am walking down the street, working away at managing my painful mental states, manage it, all this kind of mental activity, all the manipulations and the controls. And that's supposed to be healthy, or it's supposed to get me to a good, healthy place. It's denial. And because it's a kind of group consensus denial, we're all telling ourselves it isn't denial, but it's legit. So we're lying to ourselves, mass and self-deception on a mass scale. That ain't mental health. Mental health is just letting it come, letting it happen. And that sounds like I'm making light. Well, it might sound like I'm making light of the suffering that we go through, the suffering that people go through, but I'm not. It's the same for everyone, no matter how great the suffering. Liberation comes from not trying to avoid it. It's a very, very, very simple principle. It doesn't take many books to explain it. And in practice, people can understand it very easily. One drawback is, of course, if there's a lot of pain in your life and it doesn't go away, you kind of say, well, I didn't, I kind of sat with it, which is not a good way of putting it, because you're not supposed to sit with it. That's a purposeful attitude. But to say, well, I sat with it, etc., and it didn't go away. But the problem with that is that we're kind of imagining we've got an angle on it, and if we do this, radical acceptance, unconditional acceptance, stop trying to run away from what we're feeling, then that'll get rid of it. That's what we automatically assume, and so then we're looking at our watch, looking at the clock. Haven't I done enough yet? Haven't I done enough? So really that's another mental manipulation. That's another attempt to try and change our mental state on purpose by not changing it. So we're too clever for our own good, really. And it absolutely is the case that how long is a piece of string? We don't really know how much suffering is in it. So when the mental state self-displays, we don't know how much suffering is in it. No expert can tell us when we can expect for it to go away. So that makes it very, very easy to completely write off this idea, which is a very, very well-known idea in say mindfulness, where it's often repeated, this thing that the way to clear a muddy puddle is not to try and clear it, but let it settle by itself. So we understand that with regard to the mind, the content of the mind in meditation, but it's the same for everything, not just meditation. Let it clear by itself. And then we can't say, but it's not clearing, but it's not clearing. But it's not as if when it fails to clear by itself, I can think, oh, the hell with it, I'm going to go and clear it, because I can't. I make it worse then. So there's not even any point wondering or thinking or trying to object to the fact that there's more suffering in that mental state than we imagine, because there will be. There always is. But this radically changes our whole idea of what it means to be delivering mental health services, or what it means to be a therapist or psychiatric nurse or doctor. Because normally we're pushing people to get better. Either we're giving the message that do all this stuff, you will start to feel better, or we're picking up on things and saying, oh, you know, you seem to be getting better now, you look better. Or talking things up, and there is this kind of expectation that we are going to get better. Whether we as professionals admit it or not, there is this expectation, because if there wasn't an expectation that what we're doing isn't going to help, why the hell would we be doing it anyway? There must be the expectation by the very fact that we're doing it. So all it is, if that's the road we go down, which is the road that it is the road we go down, all that's happening then, we're in a situation where we're actually putting pressure on people to do something that's impossible. And we're calling that mental health care. So there's something kind of funny about that, all right. Okay, thanks for watching.